Thanks for staying with us. I'm Bill O'Reilly in the Weekdays at Bernie segment tonight. As you may know, we have been reporting that the American press firmly committed to re-electing President Obama. A new Fox News poll asks, who do most members of the media want to win the election? 58% say Mr. Obama. Just 31%, 21% believe the press favors Mitt Romney. 13% of the registered voters polled are unsure. Also, committed Democrat and NBC broadcaster Chris Matthews recently said this.
The big networks for years had establishment liberalism as their basis of true north. That's what they were, Cronkite and Edward R. Murrow, establishment liberal. Everything was liberal, basically, good, but it was a point of view. And they laughed at Goldwater. Cronkite mocked him with the way he pronounced his name. It's all true.
Well, Mr. Matthews, perhaps unknowingly, backs up Bernie Goldberg's book, Bias, from 10 years ago. Mr. Goldberg joins us now from North Carolina. So were you surprised by Matthews' admission?
Pleasantly surprised. Pleasantly. He was absolutely right in what he said, and he deserves credit. I give Chris credit for saying it. Look, if we're ever going to make progress on this media bias problem, it's going to take liberals to admit that there is a liberal bias, and it's going to take conservatives to admit that there's a conservative bias, because if we just have conservatives yelling about liberal bias and liberals yelling about the other side, we're not going to get anywhere. So hats off to Chris for this one. He got it right.
But I don't think the right denies talk radio tilts conservative, because all the big guys that are making money there are conservative. Not one liberal yacker makes any money on talk radio. I mean, substantial money. So that's provable right there. That's provable. Fox News, I mean, you have a network that basically is different from the establishment network that Mr. Matthews was talking about. Takes a much more traditional approach. It has conservative hosts on that have programs. That's unheard of in the other precincts. Never happens, never has happened. All right? I don't think anybody would disagree with that, and to that description. But then when you get into the New York Times bias, and then NBC and CBS and ABC and that culture there, you heard the former president, David Weston of ABC here, when I was grilling him about, hey, the culture over there is left, he wouldn't even admit it. He wouldn't even admit it.
Right. Two things. First, I'm talking about liberal bias and conservative bias, and without going into a long song and dance, I contend there are biases on both sides. As for David Weston, the former president of ABC News, you're absolutely right. He wouldn't even acknowledge what everybody this side of Neptune knows, that the culture of ABC News and NBC News and CBS, the culture, the institutional culture is liberal. He couldn't even acknowledge that.
You know, and I know that, and I was a little bit surprised. You know, Les Moonves, who runs CBS and CBS News, he was at that big Obama fundraiser in L.A. He was there, and he said, hey, it's a different world now. Yeah, I'm in charge of it, but you know, here I am. So I think all of that is now crumbling. So the question then becomes, all right, so everybody knows it. Anybody who denies it is not telling the truth. We all know. You were right 10 years ago. You actually got fired for being right, I think, or not.
No,
I got a hard time.
I never got fired.
You got the Elba, the island of Elba treatment.
No, I got the, yes, I got the island of Elba treatment, but I quit to write Bias.
Right.
And I couldn't write Bias if I was still at CBS.
Why? Why couldn't you write Bias if you were at CBS?
I never got fired.
Why couldn't you write Bias if you CBS?
Oh, what, is this a serious question, or are you pulling my chain?
I'm not sure yet. It depends on your answer.
Well, no, I mean, this is a book about, Bias was a book about liberal bias in the media and how it worked at a place that I had worked for 28 years at CBS News. They would have, I mean, I would have been turned up missing in some swamplands or something if I had been there when I wrote that book.
All right, but they would never say, well, we're going to take a reprisal against Bernie Goldberg or Bill O'Reilly or whoever it may be if they give an opinion that our operation here is tilting left. I mean, they would never say that. I mean, Dan Rather, you heard him say last week that, you know, oh, they're crazy. There's no liberal bias in the man. You know, we use David Weston as a better example as Dan Rather. Still running around saying there isn't any liberal bias. I'm not sure why, and I don't think Rather goes on these television shows and says, I'm going to lie. I think he's talked himself into it.
Yeah, absolutely true. Absolutely. If you hooked Dan Rather up to a lie detector machine and said, is there a liberal bias when you were the anchorman of the CBS Evening News? He would say no, and the needle wouldn't budge. I mean, he's not lying. He's delusional.
And Cronkite?
Well, Cronkite admitted, you know, after I wrote Bias, somebody asked Cronkite about it, and he admitted there was a liberal bias, but he said it was because journalists saw the underside of life. They covered the courts, they saw the downtrodden, the poor, and they tended to be liberal as a result. Where Cronkite let his liberalism affect things in a bad way is Cronkite went to Senator Robert Kennedy and urged him to run for president against Lyndon Johnson in the Democratic primaries. First of all, you can't encourage somebody to run for president. You know, you can't do that.
Right.
And secondly, you can't do that and then pretend you had nothing to do with his deciding to run for president. That's where Cronkite's liberalism induced him to cross the line.
All right.